adjustable, so they were awfully uncomfortable. So if you want to adjust your seats, there's 3 little knobs on your right side, one all by your butt, and one goes up and down, and the other 2 go tilty, and the other one locks the seat back in a good spot for you. So play with it at your leisure.
Wow. Was it down? No, it moved it back up, but that's good.
Okay, so I'm so glad you got here. It's really nice to have you here. We're missing a couple people, but they let me know they wouldn't be here, so we've got a good group tonight. You know, for the past couple of years, I've had the wonderful opportunity to view life from a different set of circumstances. Many of us have things in life that give us an opportunity to maybe look at things differently for first time, second time, third time. And I found that that opportunity in and of itself gave rise to all of this. Now, for years in the past, I had done public speaking. I had sat in front of groups, and I had made clear that I was an expert on multiple different topics, giving my knowledge and giving my wisdom and giving my information as I had learned it. And what was amazing was that inside of the experience of teaching knowledge, the experience was mostly academic. It was an academic experience for the people coming to my, maybe some of it might have been interesting and inspiring, maybe in some ways. But as a tool to connect people together, as a tool to open up something for another person, that wasn't the point of it. It was to educate people. And so, having gone through a personal experience of my own that's changed my way of looking at life, I would say everything I've done since then has changed the way that I've behaved in my life. I think it was Wayne Dwyer who said, when you look at things differently for the first time, everything starts to look differently. So it's a perspective of who you are and where you're coming from that dictates how you hear things and how you're experiencing things. So on the table there is some pieces of paper. I'd like you to be kind to each other and set one of those copies to each other. This is a little exercise we're going to do just to set the tone of the experience. Now, if you've done this before, then just keep your mouths closed. Don't spoil it for everybody. You don't have one?
Here we go.
Sharon's going to share one with you.
No,
Thank
the
you.
play.
Now, most of us, when we're given a task to do, we rely on, more often than not, that which we've experienced before as a way of understanding how to look at things differently. So I'm going to explain this very simply. I want you to connect all of these dots with 4 straight lines. That doesn't work now, does it? So we can connect 1, 2, 3. That doesn't work either. So why don't you work on it for just a couple of moments and see what it looks like for you if you try to figure it out for yourselves. This is not about...
With erasers.
Yes, I should have given you more than one backsides too. Again, this is not anything except for, I want you to pay... Your pen not working, Sharon?
It's working.
Good.
It's not a test. Is that what you're doing?
This is not a test. But the interesting thing is, you may start feeling like it is. You may feel like it's a test, and it may create all kinds of experiences for you because of that. The last time somebody may have asked you to do something like this may have been in school, may have been on a job, may have been somewhere in your life that you felt like you may be getting judged. You may be hard on yourself because you can't get it right. So as you're mentally trying to construct an answer for this, I want you to start paying attention to what your mind is doing while you're doing that. And the thoughts that come in your mind as you do this. Because during this talk tonight, I may say things that are antagonistic to your mind. And you may decide at one point in time, I'm not listening to this, and that's perfectly okay. I don't want to listen anymore to what this guy has to say, or this is upsetting, that's not my fault. all the different things that come into your head might come up in the midst of this conversation. So we just want you to know that that's not about the conversation as much as it is what goes on in your own mind about how the experience looks for you at that moment. So if we look at this now from a slightly different perspective, everybody here says, okay, let's think outside the box, right? Now, I framed this for you purposefully. I framed it for you by giving you the limits of the experience. I framed the box for you to force you to think that that was the edges of your reality. That was the edges of where you needed to focus. And that's how life goes many times. We have somebody tell us what life looks like, and therefore that's our experience of it, because oftentimes it seemingly works in many parts of our life, and therefore it seems to work enough. And when it doesn't seem to work, our ways of thinking about things, we more likely would struggle about it as opposed to redefine it for ourselves. So if we were to look at this from a different perspective, we can say that if you start thinking outside the box, we have an opportunity to find a solution that no longer is restricted by the confines of the experience. Now, had I not framed it for you beginning, you may have had a little bit more flexibility of your mind and a little more capacity to see it fresh. There was this great experiment. I love golf, as Ron knows. I love golf. Golf is one of those experiences that puts you at the most completely tenuous situation because you have nobody to play against. You are on your own against the forces of nature. It doesn't look that way when you're watching it. There's no forces of nature getting in the way. But if you've never played golf, you probably don't appreciate the exactitude that's required to get that little ball to do what you want it to do. Even the simplest of tasks can be incredibly infuriating. To be repeatable, repeatable, repeatable. So they had this wonderful experiment. There's a little book. I forgot the name of the guy who wrote it, but it's called Putting Out of Your Mind, which is a great illusion, right? Putting out of your mind. And one of the little experiments he did, just to elaborate and to sort of paint a picture of how our minds and our bodies work, he had a little group of little kids. He put them all on the putting green, gave them putters, thinking that maybe they've never had a putter in their hands before, giving them no lessons, and then watching them with a camera. Just putting these 10 kids on the green with lots of different holes around them and counting how many times they had to hit the ball to get it into the hole. And then summed it all up and then divided by the number of kids, and they got a score as to how many shots it took to get all those balls into the hole. And then they gave them lessons. It's a kiss of death, isn't it? They gave them lessons, and you know what happened. They all got worse. Why? Because somebody told them how to do it, and they were no longer relying on that natural instinct that we all have as wonderful athletes, despite the fact that maybe some of us don't think of ourselves that way. We all have this natural ability to be creative about how we get things done. Now, all those kids were doing it differently each way because they're all built differently and they all have different kinesthetic sense. And that's the experience we're going to have tonight. You have an opportunity to try to, instead of me telling you what's supposed to be happening tonight, I'm going to really ask you that this is a personal experience for you. Now, I've done a lot of seminars where I'm here and I'm the person who's going to tell you how things are. But let me tell you something. Knowledge and wisdom are two very different experiences. Thinking that you know what's right for everybody is very tenuous. Thinking that you know what's right for you because you've experienced it is a whole different experience. So there's a big difference between knowledge and wisdom. Now, I don't necessarily consider myself a philosophical teacher, but this is a philosophical conversation. So we'll use this quote from Eckhart Tolle that says a true philosophical teacher does not have anything to teach in the conventional sense of the word. Their function is to help you remove that which separates you from the truth of who you already are. They separate you from the truth of who you already are. So how you experience life and how you see life is your truth. That's your truth. Now someone can say, no, that's not how things are. And some of that may feel like I'm saying that tonight. But we're going to do a couple of experiments just like this that we're going to touch upon. What is the truth for you in terms of what's the experience of your life tell you about what's happening? Okay? It was that Osho said that truth is not something outside to be discovered, it's something inside to be realized. Now, as a teacher, we would like to think that we have all the answers. And my experience in my life has really been, as a teacher, to especially having been taught a very specific way of looking at the body. I found myself, maybe 10 years ago, finding limits to my capacity to see people's bodies. Now, we were taught very specific techniques about how to care for people in a chiropractic situation. And here I am applying those techniques, applying all those principles as I was taught, as I was told, as I was shown how to do in chiropractic college, just like any other specific career that you would do. And yet here were people coming into my office when I was applying those techniques as I saw them. The people were not getting better. Now, either one of two possibilities were happening in my little mechanical engineering mind. And either one was, y'all sucked. It was all your fault. You were all too broken to get fixed. Yeah, that was one possibility, right? I mean, just from a logical standpoint, it's your fault. And the other one was my fault. So I thought about what I had been taught, and what my hands were telling me was something completely different. What my hands were telling me was that this specific way of looking at the body wasn't sharing enough information about what was really happening, because the techniques were built upon somebody else's experience of how they saw the body. Now, we'd like to believe that the techniques that were taught in any kind of academic experience were all applicable to everybody that we see, that's the point of these techniques, to learn how to do that. But they're really there just to provide the beginning doorway, right? When you go to school, it's not the end stage of your learning, it's really the tools to begin the learning process. And the learning process happens through the experience of it, not through the application of those same things over and over and over again, because that's an automaton. So what the experience of what I saw was that people's bodies started to look like they had these very specific patterns of how tension, real physical tension, ran through the body. And when I started noticing that, it made sense then that the place that they were screaming, the place where the pain was at its greatest, was along that pattern, and the place where the pattern was at its tightest. And every time I would try to, which is chiropractic, we push. I had this little girl in the practice, so adorable. She'd come in and she goes, "You going to press me today?" Talk about simplifying this to the least common denominator, right? You're pressing people into the table. So here I am in the place, and we were taught those places that are most stuck, hit them harder. And yet every time I would do that, the body would become more and more angry about that experience, and not more supple, not more flexible. These ideas that we would somehow become more flexible because we got more force into our body really was in conflict with what I was actually seeing. So I had an epiphany. I had to walk away from all that I was taught. I was left without a net for a very long time because I didn't have a framework or a truth of my experience yet formulated in my brain strong enough that I can say to somebody, yes, I think I understand what's going on, and yes, I think I can help you. And I think I'll know when I can't help you. That took a long time to evolve through the experience of it, not because anybody taught me it. I couldn't have done it had I not had the basics already embedded in my understanding. I couldn't have done it had I already not been an engineer trying to apply these ideas about biomechanics and forces and all these different things. But it was the experience that gave me the doorway to start having a level of understanding, as opposed to a mental construct of what things are supposed to be. That was a huge leap forward. Now, in the past 5 or 6 years of my life, I've had the same exact experience through my own internal way of looking at my life. And when you first come to terms with the idea that somehow or another, how you see life, I think it was Bernie Siegel. You know who Bernie Siegel is? He's sort of like one of the fathers of mindfulness in the surgical world. And Bernie Siegel says, when you challenge someone's beliefs, they eventually start to behave like addicts. Meaning, they want nothing, they resist when you take away their drug, right? We've all had political conversations, right? We've all had some level of political discourse with our friends and our neighbors with different beliefs and different things. And when you perhaps have stood there and challenged something about that, does that not sound like someone who's addicted to their beliefs? We all are. I was. It's not like they're addicted and it's not me. That's who I am too. They feel good. It feels good to stand in righteousness and say, no, I'm right. It does. But it gets you nowhere because it never lets you allow to see things differently. And if really we're talking about pain tonight, if pain is an experience of the body struggled, then maybe there's something in this as well that isn't just about the physicality of pain. Maybe there's more to pain than that which we just see and touch and feel with somebody. Maybe it's not just a physical experience. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about. Is that pain is a multifocal kind of experience for people. They call it a biopsychosocial experience, right? Now, I find myself working on people in the chiropractic room, and I'm doing things. And as I'm working on people, I hear what their thoughts are. Now, sometimes the thoughts are just the menial tasks and the menial things about what life is. And sometimes what I hear is something that's getting in the way for them. Now, I am not a therapist. I am not a social worker, although sometimes I feel like I am. And I don't want to charge for it. And I found myself at a real sticking point. I found myself hearing some things that sounded very familiar to me in my own way of thinking, in my own way of dealing with life struggles, causing my own pain and my own ruminations about how life is going for me. And I wanted to say something to them. And sometimes I have. And then I realized this is not the right forum for that. It's unfair. That's not what you're paying for. So that's the origin of this. The origin of this is built on the understanding, if there's a bigger piece of the puzzle, not about chiropractic, not about pain modulation by doing physical medicine, hands-on, neurological, musculoskeletal kinds of work on your bodies. It's not about that in this room. In this room, as we would say in chiropractic college, the subluxation is above the level of your atlas. The atlas is the top bone in your neck. It's the top of where we can really do any kind of chiropractic care. And a subluxation is really an interference with a process that's going on in the body. It's getting in the way, right? We talked about removing that which separates you from the truth of who you already are. A problem with your spine is like that because you can't then move the same way. You can't experience things the same way because your nervous system, your musculoskeletal system is stopping you. So how do you experience life when you're being separated from that which you truly are, or truly what you can be, right? So, experience is the best teacher, but the tuition is high, right? Because you have to sometimes leave behind that which you've already believed to be true, that which you've already put a lot of value on. And that's sometimes hard for a lot of people. So, there are physical patterns that I see on the chiropractic table. I see the same patterns in myself emotionally, mentally, ruminating about things. Here's a little. I have some struggles with my family, as some of you have known over the years. I've had trouble with my siblings ever since my mom passed away. So much so that I unfortunately took it out on you poor people for a little while.
Is that what happened?
Yeah. Yes, I took it out on you. And I probably made it comical. Because I couldn't get in touch with the fact of how much it hurt. And that's what I do. I make things funny as opposed to letting it touch me. Now, so I went to a seminar trying to figure out how I can be a more busy chiropractor. That's what I went to the seminar for. I was trying to figure out how do I communicate chiropractic to people in such a way that everybody just wants to see me. Because I'm fabulous. Right? And I'm sitting there in the seminar, and I told the leader, I told my guy, I told all these people about how much I wanted to be coachable in this moment, about how much I wanted to really like step in and step on the court and play, and the idea of becoming a fabulous chiropractor. And this stupid person was on the stage. And all they could not get, you ever been to a group of, I don't know, a conference or something, and the person that's getting a conversation is so stuck they don't see, it's almost like watching a game show, right? It's Jeopardy. You're like, how do you not know that? right? Well, I'm sitting there listening to this girl, and all she is saying is that she can't get past this something, and she's ruminating and ruminating, and then she says, you know, I wish I could have a closer relationship with my brother. Because I love him so much, but he just doesn't hear me. And all of a sudden, I wasn't there for that. I didn't even consider that I was there to improve the relationship with my family. And all of a sudden, I saw from the perspective of what my sister may see in me. So I hadn't spoke to my sister in a couple of years. This is not therapeutic for me, by the way. This is instructional. Okay? I hadn't spoken to my sister in years. And my sister is a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, progressive, fighting. She was at the airports when the immigration policy. Just to tell you where she. I mean, she was a lawyer at the airport, fighting for immigrants, trying to find out. Right. So she's set up, right there. That's where she lives. Angry, strong woman. So I hadn't spoken to her because every time she has something going on, what do? Well, who am I? I'm the guy who wants to make everything better. So when she has something going wrong in her life, what do I say? It's going to be okay. Or else, what do I else say? It's not that big of a problem. Some of you are already getting that feeling, right? What does that feel like? That doesn't feel so good. Hey, listen, the pendulum swings. We'll have a Democrat in the White House, and then we'll have a Republican, and then we'll have a Democrat again. And I'm doing my dance. I'm doing everything I could possibly do to try to make this better because she's hurting. So here she is. I haven't heard from her in years, and she texts me. Excuse the... You live in one effed up state.
Nice.
I haven't heard from her in years. The text message comes through, you live in one because Pennsylvania voted Republican. So you live in one effed up state. And what's my instinct? It's going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. We'll fix this. We'll fight, whatever. And I caught myself. Because who I am for her in that moment is infuriating and dismissive. And I never saw it until that moment that I saw that girl on the stage. My brother doesn't hear me. So what was my reply? You're damn right it is. You're damn right I do. Because what else can she possibly have wanted to hear other than, I hear you. And it instantly changed the possibility and the tone of our lives together. Not because I was a better brother necessarily, but first time I actually heard her where she was instead of trying to make her life better. That was a huge, huge realization, you know? And so experience is the best teacher, but the tuition is very high, right? So why a workshop? It's because I see people suffering in lots of different ways and having pain. Now, pain is a real thing. It's not fictional. It's a biopsychosocial. I spelled it wrong the last time. It's a biopsychosocial experience. There are many factors that are associated. We're going to get through this part. This is sort of like potatoes. There are many factors associated with your genetics, your personal history, right? I think it's Carolyn Mace that says the story of your life is your experience of your life, meaning your biography and your biology are linked together. The things that have happened to you, things that you experienced, are written on, you know, the people that smile have smile lines, the people that frown have frown lines, right? That's on the inside too. The people that are bitter and angry have bitter chemicals and angry chemicals. If you ever had a dog who's like scared or upset and you smell their breath, you tell me that that's not different when the dog's loving you up and licking your face. I know it is for my dog. I don't go around sniffing people's breaths that are angry, so if you're angry right now, I'll stay away. Your health history, your trauma history, the cultural norms that you live in, and psychosocial status, right? Psychosocial status is an implication of what your consciousness is. Now, consciousness is a conversation about how you perceive and how you experience the world through the lens of your own eyes, through the lens of your own eyes. If you're in relationship with anybody, you know for a fact that we all see things through the lenses of our own eyes. We see things differently, right or wrong or indifferent. Our life always expresses the result of our dominant thoughts. Soren Kierkegaard. Our dominant thoughts. I'm not worthy. Right? I'm never going to get better. I have so many people that come to my office, especially because they've been everywhere else. It's not like a chiropractic care is the first thing that people choose. It's really usually the last. So the thoughts that are in their head are very much about, I'm not going to get better. Is this ever going to get better? Am I stuck here in this place in my world forever now? And we have to change people's minds about that. I used to try to convince them that chiropractic was great. Now the conversation is, you're great. You have the capacity to change. I may be able to help you get there. I'm able to point out the places that you're getting in your own way. But this is yours. This is yours to have an experience of life differently, perhaps, if you choose it. You're here for a reason. And therefore, that reason must be what I'm here telling you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. I mean, inductio reducto, whatever that expression in Latin says, that if it's the case, then it must be the case, right? Right now, pain's an epidemic. We are not alone in suffering. 100 million people in the U.S. suffering with pain on a chronic level at a cost of $600 billion in healthcare dollars. That's just healthcare dollars. $600 billion. We could put a couple hundred walls around us with that. Right? The new normal, our new normal with pain is that greater than 50% felt they had no control over their life. The people that are suffering, over half of them, felt they had no control over their life. 65% had a negative impact on their life. 75% created depression for them. 75% trouble concentrating. 75% negative impact on their sleep. 75% negative impact on their emotional state. Greater than 50% of the workforce experiences pain in any 2-week period at a cost of $600 billion in lost production. Our current treatment, medication, right? Medication is our current treatment. Substance abuse has doubled from 92 to 08. 12 million opioid users in the country, accounts for half of all ER visits, and it accounts for 115 overdoses per day. 115 overdoses a day on those kinds of medications and drugs. So, a little bit more meat and potatoes. Pain is defined as an unpleasant physical sensation, and I wrote that because everybody has a slightly different appreciation for it. When I see somebody for the first time, we do a test. I press on a place that notoriously people think of as not being painful. And I say, I'm calling that a 0. We call that a 0. Because I don't know what his experience of sensation is. We have to give him a framework to have the same conversation. 10 is, I'm sticking a needle in your eye. That's a 10. That's good. Right? So this is right for you. What is that for you? Give you a scope of what we're talking about so that we're talking the same language, right? It's an unpleasant physical sensation because some people like extreme experience. Some people love to eat hot peppers. I'm not sure if they would really say it's pain. It's pleasurable for them. And if you give them too less of a hot pepper, they'd be like, that's not so good. You'd be like, I'm dying. It's also defined as an unwanted emotional experience. Right? And the body's response to pain, whether it be an unwanted physical experience or an unwanted emotional experience, is always the same. What's our body's response when we're in pain?
Yeah.
Right? So, and that manifestation is very specific for our biopsychosocial experience, right? Where are the places that we usually get tight when we're having unwanted emotional experiences? Well, we can guess the neck, the stomach, the shoulders, the low back. Very particular ways, and guaranteed it'll be in places that you already had that experience. It'll return, that pattern will return to that experience, right? That's where that's where it always hits me. I get it right in the shoulders. Because that's your pattern. That's your pattern of experience. So the physical experience is real. It's a tissue damage that's happened. Tissue damage, tissue tearing, tissue irritation. Tissues can be muscles, ligaments, right? Bone tissues. It's signaled to the brain via the nervous system, right? That nervous system picks up the sensation of pain or irritation or something, sends that to the brain. And then the brain picks that up and then has to have a response. There has to be a biochemical response. Every thought that you have has a biochemical response. Did you know that? Every single thought is making chemicals. Every single thought is having a musculoskeletal response. Right? Every single one. Just like the extremes when we're angry or fearful or upset or nervous or whatever. But even the smallest ones. It's defined as either being acute or chronic. Acute just means that it's short-lived and it usually resolves on its own. Chronic means that you've already done what you can and it's still there. It's either local or global. Either it's just your ankle, or it's your whole leg, or it's your whole right side of your body. And there's a response that happens when it comes to physical pain. This is a critical part of life. You need this. This is how you understand what's happened to you. If you don't have it, you die early. There are children that are born without the capacity to feel physical pain. They don't have very long lives. That's what leprosy is, right? Leprosy is the dying of the nervous system. We think of leprosy in the old pictures of back in the day when we watched the movies. You know, there were leper colonies, that they were somehow... The reason why there were leper colonies is because these were people that would get infected. They were infected. They were not... This is a viral disease, transmittable, yes, but it's the problem that they were infected. All their limbs, they were, you know, you had this image of people wrapped in gauze and, you know, well, it's because they didn't know that they just cut themselves. They didn't know that they just damaged their nerves or their tissues. So they don't have a very long life expectancy. And so the interesting thing is the response isn't just like your dog. I mean, your dog has a wounded paw and they're like, you're like, I don't understand how my dog can just, you know, I'm going to go run. I'll hop. I don't care. They don't make anything mean anything for that because they don't have higher levels of consciousness. So they just experience the pain as the pain. They have the physical experience of the pain. I don't know for sure. We don't talk a lot. Me and my pup. But there is an experience of the pain that happens now, again, into the unwanted emotional experience of it. And then from there, it's determined, that response that we have is determined by our state of consciousness. We're going to get PO'd if we go to the doctor and he says, I'm sorry, the tissue hasn't healed enough yet, and now we have to keep the cast on for another 6 weeks. I can guarantee that's going to hurt a lot more when you left than when you went. Right? Mm-hmm. Right, because your expectations were that I'm getting the cast off, I'm going to go play tennis tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Right? It's determined by the consciousness and the state of our consciousness. Okay? So that's where this comes from. That's where we're going now. That suffering is different than pain. Suffering is the emotional experience that we get stuck in, the process, the pattern that we create from the physical pain that we get in. Now, many of us, I've spoken to people while they're on the chiropractic table, and they've told me things that are getting in the way. The problem that you're having with the spouse or the child or the parent or the grandparent or your coworker is the pattern that you're in with that person. You're both stuck in that pattern because that's all you see with each other. So what we'll be talking about is the variability, is the idea that you somehow can change your response by the practice that we're going to be doing here in the office, here tonight, right?
That's what you did with your sister.
That's what I did with my sister. I saw it. And the only reason I did that is because I had been first given an opportunity to awaken and see it differently. Not intentionally, I didn't try to make that happen. I was looking for help. I was open to seeing things differently. So I had like a little fire on that pot of water, hoping for something to come. Just lucky, I think, that somebody said the right thing that clicked in my brain, and I was able to hear it despite the fact that I was PO'd, why I didn't get, what I was looking for that night. But I guess I was ready. Right? So it's defined as a psychological state, or what some people call an egoic state, which we're going to talk to in a second, where our needs are greater than our expectations. So we need to have something be different than the way it actually is. So there's a disconnect between what the reality of life is and what our expectations of life are. The reality of life is that my sister is pissed off. That's all I know. The expectations are is that she's not, that she's okay. And inside of that is my upset. Inside of that is my upset, because I care. I can never understand why in the world could she not hear that I care. Because I didn't see it through her eyes. And until you do, until you can get the experience of what it looks like, then you don't see it. You just don't see it. So it originates most commonly from either a physical or sensory stimulus and an emotional trigger. That emotional trigger that we all know of. We all get triggered by our partners, by our children, by our parents, by our coworkers, by the news, by the radio, by whatever it is that triggers me off. I find myself, I listen to sports radio sometimes because it's usually not so upsetting. But you know what? I still get upset. Why? Because it just doesn't seem reasonable that people could be making $500 million to hit a ball. But you know what? I'm aware of that upsets me. Before, I had no idea why I was getting upset listening to sports radio too. Now I'm aware. I'm actually moved by sports radio. And then I would hear people on the radio like, look at this dope. This guy's getting so upset about the Sixers. And yet it upset me too. Talk about an incongruence in my life. Right? It's hard to see when we're in it. Until you don't. Until you're no longer in it. Until you stand beside and be like, holy mackerel, look at that. Look at how I am with this experience. This is how I am with this experience. That's what's real. That's what's true. When someone comes in and their ankle's hurting them or low back is hurting them and they say, why is this happening to me? Well, there's where some of the problem is for you. Why is this happening to me? That's really not a very helpful question in the context of moving somewhere. Because until you can be real about really, really you are, you have nowhere to go. It's like that Chinese finger puzzle. You stick your fingers in this stupid thing, and then you try to, I'm not comfortable here. And you can't get out until you relax and let your fingers relax and just slide one finger off. Until you are really where you are, until you really are truly where you are, then you have nowhere to go. Yeah. Okay. So, often perpetuated as a well-established response pattern, right? Our trigger creates an experience, and then we get a response. The trigger, physically, same thing. Physically, the same thing. We get a trigger event. I go play tennis. My shoulder isn't right. It's quiet. It's quiet. No one's screaming. I go play tennis again. I go serve. Ooh! Son of a bitch. Right? That's the response. It hurt. And now I made it have some meaning. If it was my dog, she'd be like, I don't want to do that again. I'll just pick my foot up and run. No conversation around it, right? That's how we do things. That's what human beings do. Pain is necessary, but is suffering necessary? Must we always have suffering? That's a question that I can't possibly answer. My feeling is, yeah, I think we all need suffering. Why? Because pain in and of itself may change your behaviors a little bit. But until we realize the backdrop of what our thoughts are about it, until we see it, you're going to be growing in your suffering until it becomes so uncomfortable that you no longer can deal with that way. And then you're forced to look at it differently. It's the possibility that sits outside of that. Right? It's in our basic human code. Through generations. It's not like we're any different. We're not any different. Maybe a little bit more in our heads about it than we maybe used to be. I don't know. Who can say? Right? One of the issues, one of the ways in which our human code processes this is our experience of time. This is a bit of a tough concept to get. Our ideas about time. Our ideas about past, present, and future. For the realists among us, what do you mean our ideas around time? Time is. It's one of the constants of the universe. It's not really true. Because if you took a clock and you placed it at the bottom of the ocean floor, and then you took a clock and you placed it on the surface of the moon, those clocks move differently. So time is not static. Not even in a concrete way, it's not static. Your head is older than your feet. Did you know that? You all got it. That's why we're gray.
Oh, is that
I got no gray feet on my... No, really. It's a physics principle that time moves faster as we move away from mass. Time and mass are related. It's Einstein's equations of relativity. Right? But we experience our timeline as a very concrete thing. We experience the passage of time as a very concrete thing. Yesterday, today, tomorrow. The truth is, none of those really exist but in our minds, in terms of our experience of them. Because we only have this moment right now to remember from yesterday. Meaning, if we're not thinking about yesterday, yesterday doesn't exist.
I forget about yesterday a lot.
Yeah, right. But I mean, it only exists in your thought of it. I mean, I don't know your yesterday. I don't know anybody's yesterday. You fly up in a plane and you look down at the ground. It's like everybody's reality at that moment is completely unconscious to you. It's kind of amazing to think about. Everybody's moments in time are their moment in time. And their yesterday is just like looking at it from, it just doesn't really exist. Nor does your future. But we, as conscious beings, are aware of that dynamic, that something happened in the past. It's part of our language. It's built into the constructs of our language. If we had no, some cultures don't have words like this. Some cultures just have words that express what the moment is. They're like, I don't know what you mean by yesterday. It doesn't really register to me. Some cultures don't have words for more than like two. Did you ever see The Gods Must Be Crazy? It's like an old movie back in the day.